Hello viewers, my name is Jordan Golson and this is the Nissan Z sports car. It's new and it is the latest in a very long line of Nissan Z cars here in the US. In Japan, of course, they're called the Fair Lady because apparently back in the 60s, the head of Nissan came to America, saw My Fair Lady and loved it, went back to Japan and said, hey, we need to name our new sports car the Fair Lady. The US folks said, we don't think that's going to sell here. And so they called it Z because it was Project Z when they were developing the first Z sports car. This is the latest Z sports car. And I know what some of you are going to say that, oh, it's just the 370 with a slight update. And yeah, it is. But that's okay because the 370Z was actually a really solid sports car. And what they've done is taken the bones of that, granted to save money, and built this, which has a totally new exterior design. It has a 400 horsepower engine from out of the Infiniti Q50 and Q60 Red Sport, which is a fantastic engine. And so they've redesigned the outside. It still has the basic Z lines and proportion and it looks great, right? But it also honors that Z heritage. They've got little bits of Z-ness all around. And you'll have to forgive me because I am not as up on my Z heritage as I could be, but the Z letter on the back, that's a certain font from one of the Zs, and then the headlamps are meant to look like a certain type of Z that was in Japan, and it sort of reflects a little bit, so it's got a very distinctive look from the front with the DRLs and the way the amber lights blink and everything. The whole car looks pretty distinctive, and the LED lights are the signature of that, and I really like them. In the front, it has this almost eye shape, and then in the back, it's got these LED loops. It looks pretty modern. It looks really good. This car, I don't know what it is about Z cars, but people get so excited about it. A friend of mine was telling me the other day that back in the early 90s, I think it was the 300ZX maybe, it came out when he was in college and he just thought that was the pinnacle of sports cars. And he was just thinking, God, I'll never be able to have that, but it's like the bedroom wall poster and he thinks it looks so cool. And it did. And the Z was always like the attainable sports car. You know, there was the Corvette and there's the Z, and now the Corvette, like, it's got an expensive, it starts around 60 grand. This one starts just under 40,000. It's 39,995 or something like that. And what they're saying is that it's 400 horsepower for 40 grand. And that's pretty solid. This engine is really good. It's a 3-liter V6 twin turbo, 400 horsepower, 350 pound-feet of torque. And it came out of the Q50 and the Q60, which are much bigger, heavier cars. And so this thing's much smaller, and it actually really zips along. And so let's talk a little bit about the exterior, because we have the headlights, which I really like. The whole front grille is actually really cool looking. When the original Proto Z came out, which was the first sort of concept car version of this, it was just sort of this open maw at the front, and I didn't love that, especially in the yellow. But this one is this gorgeous blue color, and at the front it's got this kind of two-tone thing, and it's sort of like a nickel on the top half, and then the bottom half is darker, and it's got a little spot for the radar because adaptive cruise is standard. Thank you, Nissan. The way everything comes together at the front is very throwback. It's really cool looking, and you're gonna know this car when you look at it because it looks a little different from everything else on the road, which is really hard to do these days. The creases on the hood are interesting. They sort of come to a little Y near the front, right near the Nissan logo. The way the creases at the front along the quarter panels are, it's basically, they were trying to say like it's kind of haunched back like a cat about to pounce or something like that. And it almost looks like a sheet was sort of drawn tight around the front, because all of those little creases sort of disappear by the time it gets to the door handles, and then at the back it's a little more sculpted. I love the two-tone roof on this one. It's blue down below and then has a black roof, and it has these silver katana blades, and they're literally meant to look like swords to sort of remind you of the Japanese design and the inspiration behind it. And so much of a sports car is how it looks and how you look in it. We should go through the pricing and the trim levels because it's deceptively simple. There's two trims. There's a regular trim and a premium trim, or it's sport and premium, something like that. But there's the $40,000 trim, and then there's one that's $10,000 more. You get Akebono brakes instead of regular ones, 19-inch wheels that look really cool instead of 18-inch, though the 18-inch ones are kind of throwback on the base model because it looks like the older ones from the 90s when like a 15-inch wheel was exciting. You get a rear spoiler on this, you get a limited slip differential, you get a larger screen here by 1 inch, and this one also includes navigation, but both of them also include wireless Apple CarPlay. So are you going to ever use the nav? It's kind of terrible, but it does include Google Street View, which is a little interesting. This one you get leather with the Alcantara seats. The other one is all fabric trim and heated seats, and this has a Bose stereo versus just like a regular Nissan stereo. So for $10,000, you do get quite a lot of stuff. What you do not get is any changes to the performance. The $40,000 version, 400 horsepower for $40,000, remember, is the same other than the limited slip differential in the back. These are all rear-wheel drive, and you can choose for the same price the 6-speed manual with SynchroRev matching that I have here, or a 9-speed automatic. Now, the 9-speed does get quite a bit better fuel economy than the manual, which is a little different than it used to be, but it's down by a couple miles per gallon. But if you're buying the manual, you're buying it because you want to drive it, which it's a sports car. Why wouldn't you? Do you really care about the loss in fuel economy? Probably not. Interior, you have this big digital dash cluster, and that's standard. This, they said, was designed by one of the Nissan factory racing drivers to be sort of what's the essential information that you want to see in your sports car. So one of the cool things is the red line is 7,000 RPM, and it's directly straight up and down at 12 o'clock. So as the RPM meter gets going, when it gets to 12, that's when you got to change gear. You also have a shift indicator at the top, and so it goes green, yellow, red. Red's when you got to shift, and you can adjust that too if you want to decide where you want your shift point to be. And then you also have 3 analog gauges up here, which is pretty cool these days. So you have an analog boost gauge over there, and so you can watch that go up. Then you have a turbo speed indicator, and it tells you how many RPM the turbo is spinning, and it goes up to something like 220,000 RPM for the little turbine in there. And that's really cool. I don't know if I've seen another vehicle that has a turbo speed indicator. Over here, you do have this nice big touchscreen, and it runs Nissan's system, which is not very good, and they're sort of aware of that, but it has wireless CarPlay. So do you need it? No, you just use wireless CarPlay. Android Auto is not wireless. A little bit of a bummer if you're an Android user, but you know, that's what you get for being an Android user, right? USB-C and USB-A ports down here. You do have a place to put your phone. Physical volume knob, physical tune knob. That's kind of cool. Down here, these are, you may notice if you are a 370Z person, these are actually a carryover from the regular 370Z, but you know, you can set the temperature and put it to auto and just leave it. Also a throwback, actually, this is from the 350Z, the original, is the window buttons over here. This panel is the same from like 2006 or something, so that's pretty funny. Start stop button right here, and then you have this, which is the synchro mode. And so what this is if you're going to downshift, it will automatically rev match for you. So let's say I'm driving along here at 70 miles an hour, and let's say I want to downshift to 4th. Without touching the gas at all, put the clutch in, put it into 4th, let the clutch out, automatically matches. So you don't get any herky-jerkiness. That's pretty cool. So if you do want to match your own, you have this button here, and you can hold that down, and then after a moment, it will take away the little S that it was displaying there on the screen, and then you can press it again, and it puts it back, and you have synchro again. Down here in the middle, you have the controls for the heated seats, and then this also pops the trunk open. You do have a physical emergency brake, so that's kind of cool. Not many cars have that these days. And then last thing on the inside is you do have a cup holder here, but if you're a 370 fan, know that there's now a second cup holder if you slide this back. And then in the center console here, you have a little bit of storage, not a lot. Behind the seats, you do have a little bit of storage there as well, and then the trunk for a sports car is okay spacious. It's a hatchback, so you got like a little bit of room, but that has not changed from the 370Z. And so that's the interior. It's very familiar, but it is upgraded, sort of the new generation, right? Now the wheelbase is the same as the 370Z. The roofline is the same height as the 370Z, but it is a bit longer. It's 5 inches longer, thanks to a little bit longer front overhang and rear overhang. but it doesn't look out of proportion. It actually might even look a little bit better than the 370, which always felt a little like squished to me. In many ways, you can think of the whole car as an upgraded 370, only they've dropped the 370 and now it's just Z. But it's better in just about every way. This engine is fantastic, the one that came out of the Infiniti Q50. I drove that Q50 a few years ago, and it was phenomenal. And now to have it in this smaller car, hooked up to a manual transmission, it's so much fun. It just leaps forward at the slightest provocation. Fourth gear, put your foot down, and you're off. Most buyers, I think, are going to drive it here on the highway, but if you do take it onto the twisty roads, this platform is fantastic. There's a reason the 370 has stuck around for as long as it has, and they were still selling them with the older motor and the older interior and all that, but it was still a good sports car. And now this is an improved version of that with the new old engine. And actually, it's easy to say, oh, it's got an old engine, why would you want that? Well, number one, you're getting 400 horsepower, 350 torque in a rear-wheel drive sports car with a manual transmission for $40,000. Or $50,000 if you upgrade. But because this engine has been around for a while, there are a ton of aftermarket accessories that you can put on it if you want to customize the air intake or the turbos or any number of things. All of these parts already exist. So you can buy this car, which should hit dealers in the US at some point this summer, and then immediately take it to your tuning house and start getting to work on it. Whereas if it had a brand new engine, it might take a year for all those new components to come out. So if you want to take this and upgrade it and then get on the track right away, you can do that. And yeah, it's easy to criticize Nissan and be like, oh, you just took an old car and you upgraded it slightly and it's still an old car. Or, you know, oh, it's a 370Z, why don't you just leave the 370 logo on it? The Z has always been the affordable sports car, and it gets to be affordable by being a little bit more thrifty with how you design it. Using an older platform, using an older engine, but combining them in a way that brings a lot of value to the buyer. If you want, you can go spend $30,000 or something and get a Miata, spend a bit more, and you can get this. Much more power, a lot more sporty, or you can go buy that Mercedes AMG GTR that I just passed, which is $200,000. But this one's gonna be just as much fun on the track, maybe even more so, because it's always more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow. And now this isn't even going to be slow, but it's just not going to be as fast as an AMG GTR. And I'd be willing to bet that the guy who owns that AMG GTR there is not going to be able to get much more out of his car than I am out of this. I'm not entirely sure why, but I've always had a soft spot for the Z cars, and that certainly continues with this. This one looks special from the outside. The pricing is terrific if you'll be able to find one, and I'll get to that in a second. But it's just a special car. It looks good, it performs, it's going to be great on the track, and it's infinitely upgradable if that's the route you want to take. If you buy this car, it will put a smile on your face every time you drive around, and it'll put a smile on the face of all the folks around you because they'll get to look at it. There's a little Easter egg on the back at the bottom of the rear window, and I can actually see it in the rearview mirror here. It says, since 1969. The Z cars have been around for more than 50 years now, almost as long as the Ford Mustang. And it's almost as storied a history. And now there's this new one, and really, I couldn't be happier with it. Are there any major complaints about it? Well, if you want to be a jerk, yeah, it uses buttons from the old one. It uses the same platform as the old one. But it was a good platform, and they've taken a good engine from another car and put that in here. And it's going to be way more fun in this than you were ever going to be able to have in the Infiniti Q50 and Q60. I can't even really complain about the crap infotainment system here. And I always say all I want in a car is wireless CarPlay, because the maps and the UI and everything are going to be better in here than they are in pretty much any other car. And so I think this is probably the most fun you're going to have for $40,000. Now, that's if you can find one for $40,000. They're not doing any sort of order online or anything. You have to call your local Nissan dealer, put down a reservation, and when they start arriving this summer, make sure that they don't charge you a market adjustment on an in-demand car. Now, Nissan says there's nothing they can do about it, and so if dealers do choose to mark up the car, you're pretty much stuck with that. If you can find a dealer that's not going to charge you a market adjustment and you can actually get this for $40,000 or $50,000, this is a solid sports car, great value. It's going going to put a smile on your and everyone around you's face, because that is what the Z is all about. And so, if you'll excuse me, I have another half hour with this car, so I'm going to go enjoy it. If you enjoyed this video, click here to watch another one. Thank you so much for watching. Drive safe.